The elevator doors opened on the wrong floor. Nadia did not know that yet. She stepped out with her delivery bag over one shoulder and the package tucked under her arm, already checking the address on her phone screen against the number on the wall. 32nd floor. The number matched. She slid the phone back into her jacket pocket and walked forward. The hallway was quiet in the way that expensive places are always quiet, like the building itself had decided that noise was beneath it. The carpet was dark, the lights were low, and at the far end of the hall, in front of a door that was slightly open, stood two men who had not been there a second ago. They were large. They wore dark suits. They were looking directly at her. Nadia slowed her steps but did not stop. She had been a delivery woman for 3 years. She had walked into office buildings at midnight and apartments where the smell told her a story she did not want to know. She had knocked on doors in neighborhoods where people did not answer unless they were expecting you, and sometimes not even then. She knew how to keep her face flat and her body steady, because in her job, looking calm was the same as being safe. She held up the package so they could see it. "Delivery," she said, "for Suite 3204. Neither man moved. She read the number on the nearest door, 3203. She was one door away. She kept walking. One of the men said something in Korean. His voice was not loud, but it filled the hallway the way a sound fills a room when there is nothing else in it. Nadia did not look at him. She stepped around him, reached the door of 3204, and knocked twice. The door swung open before her knuckles had finished landing. The room on the other side was not a hotel suite. Or it was, technically, but it had been rearranged into something else. The furniture had been pushed to the edges. A long table sat in the center. Around it were 6 men, and every single one of them had gone still the moment she appeared in the doorway. On the table there were documents. There was a phone. There was a glass of water that nobody was drinking, and there was a package, already opened, that looked exactly like the one she was holding. Nadia looked at the open package on the table, then at the one in her arms. She looked at the address label on hers again. The numbers matched. The name matched. Everything matched. She had the right address. She was just at the wrong meeting. She lifted her eyes. At the head of the table sat a man who was not looking at the documents, or the phone, or the water. He was looking at her. He had been looking at her since the moment the door opened, and he had not moved once. He was not a big man in the way that his guards were big. He was lean and still, the kind of still that is not relaxed but controlled, the way a rope is still when someone is gripping both ends. His face gave nothing away. His eyes did not leave hers. Nadia held up the package one more time. "I just need a signature," she said. Her voice came out even. She was very proud of that. Nobody moved. Nobody said anything. 6 men sat at a table full of papers and did absolutely nothing, as if they were waiting for someone to tell them what to do next. She got the feeling that this was not something that happened to them often. The man at the head of the table said something. One sentence. Korean. Quiet. Delivered to the room but aimed at her. And the room moved. 2 men stepped back. One pulled out a chair at the far end of the table, away from the documents, and stood beside it. An invitation, or an instruction. The difference in this room was probably not very large. Nadia did not sit down. She set the package on the nearest clear surface and pulled out her phone to load the signature screen. "I don't need to stay," she said. "I just need a name on this." The man at the head of the table spoke again. Same quiet voice. 2 words. She understood them. She had not planned to understand them. She had not planned to be standing in this room at all. But she had grown up with Korean in her ears the way some people grow up with traffic, constant and invisible, absorbed without intention, and those 2 words landed in her chest before her brain had a chance to decide what to do with them. He had said, "She stays." Nadia looked at her phone. Then at the door. One of the large men from the hallway was now standing in front of it. He had not moved there aggressively. He had not slammed it shut or crossed his arms. He had simply placed himself between her and the exit with the same casual certainty of a wall. She put her phone back in her pocket. "Fine," she said. "Fine, fine, fine." She sat down in the offered chair. She did not look at the man at the head of the table again, because she had already seen what she needed to see. She had learned, years ago, which rooms to read fast and which men to watch closely, and she had done both of those things in the first 40 seconds. She knew the shape of the situation. She understood that the package in her arms had been the trigger, not the reason. Something had already gone wrong in this room before she arrived, and she had walked into the space that something left behind. What she did not know yet was what they wanted her for. She did not have to wait long. A door at the side of the room opened and a man walked in wearing a light gray suit and carrying nothing. He was older, somewhere past 60, with white hair, and the kind of tan that comes from years rather than vacations. He spoke before he was fully in the room, and he spoke in Italian, fast and regional, the dialect of Naples that has its own rhythm and its own cruelties built in. He said that he had been waiting for 40 minutes. He said that he did not wait for anyone. He said that if the terms were not reviewed in the next hour, he was leaving and taking the offer with him. Nobody in the room responded, not because they were ignoring him, because not one of them understood a word he had said. The man at the head of the table sat forward very slightly, the first movement he had made, and his jaw was tight. He said something in Korean to the man on his right, low and controlled, and the man on his right opened his phone, typed something, and held it out. A translation app. The Italian man looked at it. Then he looked at the man holding it. Then he said something in dialect so thick and so fast that the app caught approximately one word in 5 and produced a sentence that meant nothing at all. The man at the head of the table read the translation. His expression did not change, but something shifted in the air of the room, the way air shifts before weather, subtle and complete. Nadia was looking at the package in her lap. The label had a small oil stain on the corner from where the contents had leaked slightly in transit. The package contained, according to the manifest on her phone, 1 bottle of Italian extra virgin olive oil, gift-wrapped, addressed to Suite 3204. Someone in this building had ordered a bottle of olive oil delivered to a room full of men who needed an Italian translator and did not have one. The universe, Nadia had always felt, had a very specific sense of humor. She looked up. The Italian man was still talking, faster now, irritated that no one was responding. He switched to English, heavily accented. Someone in this room speaks Italian, yes? Because I was told there would be a translator present. Silence. He spread his hands. Then what exactly is the point of this? The man at the head of the table said nothing. He was very good at saying nothing. It was clearly a practiced skill. But his eyes had moved across the room in a specific way, checking each face, and they landed, briefly, on Nadia. She kept her own face flat. He watched her for 3 seconds. She counted. Then he said, in English, careful and deliberate, like someone placing objects on a shelf, "You speak Italian." It was not a question. He had heard something in her voice earlier, some shape of accent she had not fully covered, and he had filed it. She understood that she had been read without knowing she was being read, and that was the most unsettling thing that had happened so far. "I speak several things," she said. "Italian," he said again. She looked at the Italian man in the gray suit. She looked at the documents on the table. She looked at the door, where the large man was still standing. Her mother had a dialysis appointment in 11 days. The account had a balance that would not cover it. Nadia had been planning to pick up a night shift at the second job this weekend, and the weekend after, and probably the one after that. "I'm not a professional translator," she said. "No," the man at the head of the table said. "You are a delivery woman." He said it without contempt, without any particular weight. A simple statement of observable fact. And then he said, still in that careful placed English, "But you are here." Nadia looked at the package on her lap, the olive oil, the stained label, the completely absurd situation of being the most qualified person in a room she had stumbled into by accident. "The delivery fee," she said. "I still get that." Something happened in the man's face. It was very small. It was over in less than a second, but she saw it, and she knew what it was. He almost smiled. "Yes," he said. "You still get that." Nadia set the package on the table. She stood up. She walked to the empty chair nearest the Italian man and pulled it out and sat down. She folded her hands. She looked at the Italian man. "Tell me what you came here to say," she said, in Neapolitan dialect, word for word, not one shade gentler than his own. From the beginning. The Italian man blinked. Then he sat down too. At the head of the table, the man who had not smiled was watching her with the specific attention of someone who has just learned something they did not expect to learn. She did not look at him. She had a job to do. The delivery, it turned out, was just getting started. The Italian man's name was Lorenzo. He had been in the room for less than 20 minutes when he decided that Nadia was the only person worth talking to. She had not told him her name. She had not told him she was a delivery woman, or that she had arrived here by accident, or that the package on the table was the reason she was sitting in this chair. She had simply started translating. Clean and direct, no softening, no editorializing, and Lorenzo had recognized something in her dialect that made him sit up straighter and start speaking like he meant it. He was here about a shipping contract, 3 years of exclusive rights through a port in southern Italy, specifically for certain cargo that needed to move without documentation and without attention. He had the connections on the Italian side. The man at the head of the table, whose name she still did not know, had the connections on the Korean side. The deal was supposed to have been finalized 2 weeks ago. It had been delayed. Lorenzo was not patient. Lorenzo did not like delay. Nadia translated all of this. Every word, every implication, every shade of irritation Lorenzo put behind his sentences. She translated it exactly. She did not translate what he said under his breath when she turned back to the Korean side of the table to speak. Those were personal observations about the room, about the suits, about the temperature, about the quality of the water. She left those out. Not out of kindness, out of efficiency. They were not relevant. The man at the head of the table received her translations without expression. He would listen, consider, then respond in Korean to the man on his right, who would relay the information in careful, grammatically broken English, and Nadia would put it into Italian for Lorenzo. The chain was slow, but it held. She learned his name on the second exchange. His second-in-command said it when asking him a question, just once. A name used the way you use a name when there are no outsiders in the room, and you forget, briefly, that there is one now. Kang Ji-hoon. She did not react. She was already turning to translate something Lorenzo had said about payment timelines. The meeting ran for 2 hours. Lorenzo drank 3 cups of tea that were brought to him without being requested, which told her that these men were very good at managing people they needed to keep comfortable. She was not brought tea. That told her something too. She was not a guest. She was a tool. The distinction was useful to know. During a pause while Ji-hoon conferred quietly with his team, Lorenzo leaned toward her and asked, in low Neapolitan, where she was from. Naples, she said, which was true. Originally. He asked what she was doing in Seoul. Working, she said, which was also true. He nodded with the slow satisfaction of a man who finds the world sensible when it confirms his expectations. He had clearly decided she was some kind of professional fixer, positioned here intentionally, and she did not correct him. Let him think what he needed to think. The room was safer for her if everyone in it believed she belonged. Ji-hoon came back to the table. He spoke. She translated. Lorenzo responded. She translated back. This continued for another hour. At one point Lorenzo said something that made her go still. He said it in dialect, almost to himself, not directed at her, while he was looking at a document one of Ji-hoon's men had passed across the table. He said that the port access included the northern warehouse block, the one they had cleaned out after what happened with the Ferraro family in 2019. She knew about the Ferraro family. She knew considerably more about what happened in 2019 than anyone in this room would have expected her to know. She turned back to Ji-hoon's side of the table. She translated Lorenzo's comment about the warehouse as a reference to restructured storage space available for expanded inventory. Clean, accurate in the broad shape, completely different in the specific weight. She felt Ji-hoon's eyes on her side profile when she finished speaking. She did not turn to meet them. She looked at her hands, which were folded on the table, which were not shaking, which she was very deliberately keeping from shaking. The rotating. Without noticing, she had picked up the small ceramic teacup that had been set near her seat, the one meant for someone else who was not here, and she was turning it in her fingers. One rotation, one rotation, one rotation. The glaze was smooth except for a tiny ridge along the base where the firing had left a line. She set it down when she realized she was doing it. The meeting ended an hour later, with both parties agreeing to a secondary meeting in 3 days. Lorenzo stood, straightened his suit, and addressed Nadia directly. He told her in Italian that she was very good at this. He said she understood things beyond the words. "Thank you," she said, in Italian, which gave nothing back. He left with one of Ji-hoon's men to be escorted to the elevator. The room began to clear. The other men at the table gathered documents and phones and moved toward the adjoining room without being told to, with the practiced efficiency of a team that had worked together for a long time. Nadia sat where she was. She was not sure if she was allowed to leave yet, and she had learned in the past 3 hours that waiting for clarity in this room was smarter than assuming. Ji-hoon did not move from his chair either. He waited until the room was empty except for the two of them. Then he looked at her for a moment, the same way he had looked at her since the beginning, reading without asking permission. "You changed something," he said, in English, still careful, still placed. She did not pretend she did not know what he meant. "He made a comment," she said. "It wasn't relevant to the deal." "What was the comment?" She looked at the cup. The hairline crack she had not noticed before ran from the rim down about 2 centimeters. Very fine, the kind you only see when the light is right. "He referenced a business conflict from a few years ago," she said. "Family name, old history. It would have created a problem in the room that didn't need to exist." Ji-hoon was quiet for long enough that she looked up. He was watching her with an expression that she could not read completely, which bothered her, because she was generally good at reading people. "Why?" he said, not as a question. "Did you protect the room?" She did not have a clean answer for that. She had not planned to do it. She had heard the words, understood the weight of them, and made a decision in the span of a breath. She was not entirely sure what the decision had been based on. "I needed the deal to close," she said. "You hadn't paid me yet." He looked at her for another moment. Then he reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and set an envelope on the table. He slid it toward her. She picked it up. She did not open it. "For today," he said. "The 3 days will be a separate arrangement." She looked at the envelope. Then at him. "I didn't agree to 3 days." "No," he said. "But you will." He stood up and walked toward the adjoining room without waiting for her answer, with the absolute certainty of a man who does not ask for things because he has spent 11 years in a position where things simply come to him. Nadia sat at the empty table. The documents were gone. Lorenzo was gone. The ceramic cup sat near her left hand with its invisible crack. She picked up the cup and looked at it. She thought about the 11 days until her mother's appointment. She thought about the envelope in her hand. She thought about what Lorenzo had said about the Ferraro family in 2019, and what she knew about that, and what it meant that she had been in this room today. She set the cup down. She stood up. She put the envelope in her jacket pocket. She picked up her delivery bag from where she had left it near the door. One of the large men from the hallway opened the door for her without being asked. She walked out. She pressed the elevator button. She stood in the hallway and looked at the closed door of 3204. 3 days. He had not told her what the rate would be. He had not asked whether she had other jobs, other obligations, other reasons she might say no. He had said she would agree, as though the conversation had already happened, and this version of it was just catching up. The elevator opened. She thought about her mother. She thought about the dialysis machine, the beeping, the 3-hour wait in the chair twice a week. She stepped into the elevator. The doors closed on her reflection, and on the hallway, and on the room she was already deciding to go back to. She had not planned to stay. That was the first thing she told herself when she woke up in the hotel room that Ji-hoon's men had given her, in the suite 2 floors below the 32nd floor, with actual cotton sheets that felt nothing like the ones at her apartment. She had not planned to stay. She had planned to go home, check her bank account, eat something from the convenience store below her building, and sleep. That had been the plan. The plan was currently lying somewhere in the hallway outside 3204, very flat. She sat on the edge of the bed in the hotel robe. Underneath the robe she was still wearing her delivery uniform. The jacket, the dark trousers, the boots she had worn for 10 hours. She had not changed because changing felt like a decision she had not made yet. The robe was warm and the room was clean, and the window showed a version of Seoul that she normally did not see, all light and distance, the city looking manageable from up here in a way it never did from street level. She called her mother. The call connected on the second ring, which meant her mother was awake even though it was past 10, which meant she had been waiting. I picked up extra shifts, Nadia said. This week and next, maybe the week after. Her mother asked if she was eating. Yes, Nadia said, which was not fully true. She had eaten the crackers from the minibar. Her mother said that her knees had been bad today, but that the woman from next door had come and they had watched a program together, and it had been very funny. Good, Nadia said. That's good. Her mother asked when she was coming to visit. Soon, Nadia said. They said good night. Nadia set the phone face down on the bedside table and looked at the window. She thought about money, the way people think about it when they have just enough to know how much they need. Not with panic. Anymore. That had burned out a long time ago. Now it was just arithmetic, steady and ordinary, always running in the background. The envelope from yesterday was in her jacket pocket. She had not yet opened it. She opened it now. The amount was written on a small card inside. Just the number. No currency symbol, no explanation, no attached conditions, just the number. She sat with it for a moment. It was more than she made in 3 weeks. She put the card back in the envelope. She put the envelope in her jacket pocket. She lay back on the bed in the robe and the uniform and the boots, and stared at the ceiling. Fine, she thought. Fine, fine, fine. In the morning, a knock at the door came at 7 exactly. One of the men from the hallway stood outside with a tray of food, actual breakfast, rice and soup, and things she had not eaten properly in a while. He set it on the table near the window and left without speaking. She ate standing up, looking at the city. At 8, the same man came back and led her to the 32nd floor. Ji-hoon was already at the table. He was looking at documents, a pen in his hand, reading with the focused quiet of someone who considers time wasted if it is not being used. He did not look up when she came in. She sat down. She folded her hands. He looked up. 3 days, he said. You reviewed the rate. She had. The card in her pocket had already been reviewed, and re-reviewed, and reviewed a third time in the elevator on the way up. I reviewed it, she said. I want it doubled. He looked at her for a moment. It is already generous. It is, she agreed. Double it and I work 3 days. Keep it where it is, and you spend the next 3 days testing translation apps and hoping Lorenzo doesn't notice. He put the pen down. She kept her face even. She was not testing him. She was not being brave. She was doing arithmetic. He said something in Korean to the man on his right. The man on his right nodded and left the room. Ji-hoon looked at her. You will be paid double at the end of the 3rd day, he said, if the deal closes. When the deal closes, she said. Something crossed his face. Not quite the not smile from yesterday. Something more considered. When? He agreed. She looked around the room. The documents, the phone, the chairs arranged the same way as the day before, the tea service on the side table, 2 cups this time, 1 for her. She noticed it. She said nothing about it. She pulled out her phone and checked her dispatch app. She had 14 messages from the delivery company asking where she was and why she had missed her morning routes. She typed a reply. Family emergency. Back in 3 days. She sent it. She put the phone away. The second meeting with Lorenzo, she said. What are the outstanding points? Ji-hoon turned the document on the table to face her. He walked her through it, point by point, in his careful English, and she listened and asked questions, and took notes on a pad that someone had left at her seat, and the morning moved forward, and the room was all business, and outside the window, the city was its regular, unreachable self. But something had shifted, small and real. She had 2 cups of tea on the side table, and she had named her rate, and he had said when, instead of if, and none of that was nothing. She kept her face flat. She was very good at that. In the afternoon, Ji-hoon left the room to take a call. She was alone at the table with the documents and the tea she had been nursing for the past hour, going cold. She read through the contract points again, the ones in English, and made notes about the language, the places where the wording was loose enough to be dangerous. Through the wall, she heard his voice, not the words, just the shape of it, low and continuous, the cadence of someone managing something complicated. She had heard that kind of phone call before, from the other side of thin apartment walls, from people in her neighborhood who also had things to manage that required that specific tone. Then she heard it. Through the wall, in Korean, a sentence directed at the person he was with, not at the phone. He said, "Do not let her leave the building." Nadia set down the cup. She looked at the document in front of her. She looked at the door. One of the large men from the hallway was sitting on a chair outside. She could see his shoulder through the gap. He was always there. She had thought it was standard. Security. Standard presence in a room like this. She looked at the document again. She thought about the envelope, the rate she had negotiated, the second cup of tea. She thought about all the small ways a room like this manages a person it needs to keep cooperative, the food and the comfort and the small recognitions, and she thought about how she had read those things as signals of respect, and how she had been, possibly, reading them wrong. She was not a translator. She was leverage. She had already known this, she realized. She had known it when he said you stay on the first day, and she had sat down anyway. She had factored it in the way she factored in everything. As a condition of the situation, something to manage around. She was good at managing around things. She had been doing it her whole life. The thing was, leverage could be played in both directions. She picked up the cup again. It had gone cold, but she drank it anyway. She flipped to a new page on the notepad and started writing out every outstanding point in the contract, every place where the language could be tightened, every potential problem in the secondary meeting. She would do the job perfectly. She would give him exactly what he needed. She would close the deal. And then she would leave. Not because she was afraid, because she had decided to. And in her experience, the thing that actually held people in rooms was not the man at the door. It was believing they had no other option. She knew her options. She had always known her options. She just needed 3 days to use them. The second meeting with Lorenzo was not the same as the first. Lorenzo arrived differently on the second day. The day before, he had come in with impatience on him like a coat, loud and visible, designed to establish that his time was worth more than yours. Today he came in quieter. He sat down. He accepted the tea. He looked at Nadia when he greeted the room, not at Jihoon, which told her that he had spent the night deciding who in this room was actually useful to him. She greeted him in Neapolitan dialect. He responded with something like warmth. The meeting ran all morning and into the afternoon. The terms were complicated and the documents were dense, and Nadia's job was to be the wire that the current ran through, clear and accurate and invisible. She translated. She turned Korean into Italian, and Italian into English and back again, an endless loop, and she held it together with concentration so complete that the room outside her immediate focus blurred to background. Lorenzo was sharp. She had underestimated that the day before. He was older, and he talked about the old days, and he played the role of the slow, warm, regional uncle. But underneath it, he had a mind that tracked every number in every document, and came back to any inconsistency 3 exchanges later, as if it had been sitting there waiting. She respected that. She did not like him, particularly, but she respected it. Jihoon was also sharp. She had not underestimated that. He asked precise questions and listened to the full translation before responding, never speaking over the process, never interrupting. He had a quality that she found genuinely rare, the ability to sit inside uncertainty without fidgeting, without pushing it away. He waited for information the way still water waits. Everything came to the surface eventually. The problem came in the 3rd hour. Lorenzo's partner arrived. Nobody had mentioned a partner. The door opened and a second man walked in, older than Lorenzo, heavier, with the kind of face that has been in difficult rooms for a long time and has stopped reacting to what it sees there. He sat down beside Lorenzo without introducing himself to the room. He looked at Nadia. She looked at the documents in front of her. She knew his face. She had known it for 6 years, from a distance, from photographs, and from conversations she was not supposed to have been part of, and the kind of knowledge you accumulate in a family that is adjacent to certain industries without being directly inside them. His name was Victor Gallo. He had been connected to the Ferraro family business before it ended, and he had walked away from that ending unscathed in the way that only people who cause endings usually do. He said nothing to her. He spoke to Lorenzo in low Italian, reviewing documents, asking about the terms, normal meeting behavior. He had not recognized her. She was dressed differently than she had ever been dressed in any context where their paths might have crossed. She was younger than the last time any of those photographs were recent. She was fine. She translated. Clean and accurate and invisible. Lorenzo and Victor conferred. Jihoon's team conferred. The afternoon moved forward. And then Victor leaned back and said, in the Neapolitan dialect, to Lorenzo, casually and conversationally, that the northern warehouse block was perfect for the arrangement, because the Ferraro situation had cleared out the only people who knew the full layout, and that included the family's youngest daughter, who had apparently sold everything she knew and then disappeared. Nadia was mid-sentence when he said it. She finished the sentence she was translating. She moved without pause to the next point. She translated Victor's comment as, "The warehouse infrastructure is fully available. No prior occupants or complications." She did not look up from the documents. Her hands were folded on the table, exactly as they always were, one over the other, still. She thought about the notepad in her jacket pocket with the outstanding contract points. She thought about the numbers on the card in the envelope. She thought about her mother's dialysis machine, and the appointment in 8 days now, and the account balance. She translated the next sentence. The meeting moved forward. She was very good at this. She had been practicing, in one form or another, for a long time. At the break, Lorenzo stepped out to take a call. Victor stayed at the table. He poured himself water. Nadia gathered the documents she had been working from and arranged them into a stack, neat, clean, something to do with her hands. Victor looked at her. "You are from Naples," he said, in Italian, conversational. "Originally," she said. "Your dialect is very specific," he said. "East side." "More or less," she said. He looked at her for a moment, measuring. Not hostile, just precise. Then Lorenzo came back and Victor turned away and the meeting resumed. She sat with her hands folded and translated everything that was said for the next 2 hours. At the end of the session, the parties agreed to the final meeting the next day. Terms were close. The deal was almost done. Lorenzo shook hands with Jihoon, which she translated the significance of for neither side, because it needed no translation. Victor nodded at the room as he left. He nodded at her. She nodded back. The room cleared. She was alone at the table again, the way she had been at the end of the first day. The documents were still in front of her. Her notepad was at her elbow. The 2 teacups were cold. Jihoon came back into the room. He did not sit down. He stood at the end of the table and looked at her. "The new man," he said. "Victor." "What about him?" she said. "Did anything change?" She looked at the documents. "The terms didn't change," she said. "That is not what I asked." She looked up. He was watching her with that reading expression, the one she had been trying to decode since the first day, and still could not fully get to. She understood most people. She had grown up needing to understand most people. Jihoon was the specific kind of difficult to read that comes not from hiding things but from genuinely processing everything before showing anything, and the gap between input and output was a place she could not see into. "He referenced an old business matter," she said. "I translated it as a logistical update. It was more accurate that way." "Why more accurate?" "Because the old matter is not relevant to this deal," she said. "And it would have created problems in the room that would have delayed the close." He was quiet. "You did the same thing yesterday," he said. She looked at the documents again. "I did my job," she said. "You did more than that." She had no clean answer for that either. She had a complicated answer, one that involved 6 years of knowing when to speak and when to translate a thing into something safer, but she did not give it to him. She gave him silence, which in her experience was usually the most honest available option. He pulled out the chair at the head of the table and sat down. He set his phone on the table. He looked at it for a moment, not at her. "Tomorrow is the last session," he said. "After it closes, you will receive the agreed payment." "When it closes," she said. The same thing crossed his face. the not-quite smile. When? He said. She stood up. She gathered her notepad. She looked at the cup on the table, the one she had been given on the second day. She turned it over in her hand. The crack from the first day was finer now, or maybe she was just used to it. I need the full text of the outstanding terms sent to my room, she said. The final session will move fast. He nodded. She walked to the door. Behind her, she heard him say something in Korean, not to the men outside, to himself, or to the room, or to the specific silence she left behind her when she walked out. She understood every word. She did not turn around. She waited until the elevator doors had closed before she let herself think about what he had said. He had said, she saved it. The final session lasted 4 hours. Lorenzo arrived with Victor and 2 other men whose names Nadia was not given and did not ask for. Ji-hoon arrived with his full team. The table was full. The documents were final drafts, which meant every word was being weighed before it was agreed to, and the room had the particular pressure of a thing that is almost done, and knows that almost done is where things go wrong. Nadia sat where she always sat. Notepad, folded hands. The arrangement had become familiar in 3 days in the way that anything becomes familiar when you do it with full concentration. She translated. She translated for 4 hours, and in those 4 hours she held the room the way a tightly pulled wire holds a structure. Every exchange, every clarification, every point where Lorenzo's impatience pushed against Ji-hoon's precision, she caught it before it became friction and turned it into movement. She acknowledged privately, very good at this. Not because she had been trained, because she had spent her whole life in rooms where she was the youngest person, the foreign one, the one who did not fully belong, and she had learned to be useful enough that belonging became a secondary question. The deal closed at 4 in the afternoon. Lorenzo did not shake Ji-hoon's hand this time. He reached across the table and shook Nadia's first. You, he said, in Neapolitan dialect, are wasted on whatever you were doing before this. Deliveries, she said. He laughed. It was a real laugh, not a polite one. He shook Ji-hoon's hand next, and then gathered his team, and was gone within 6 minutes, with the efficiency of a man who does not linger after getting what he came for. The room began to clear. Nadia gathered her notepad. She straightened the documents that were still on her side of the table. She looked at the tea service on the side table and thought about the first day, when there had been 1 cup, and the second day, when there had been 2, and how that small thing had been the most honest signal she had received in this entire building. One of Ji-hoon's men set an envelope on the table in front of her, larger than the first one. She picked it up. She put it in her jacket pocket. Your car is ready, the man said. Whenever you are. She nodded. She stood. She picked up her delivery bag, which had been in the corner of this room for 3 days, still with the remaining delivery manifests from the day she arrived, routes she had never completed. She would have to explain that. She would figure it out. She walked to the door. Nadia. She stopped. She turned. Ji-hoon was still at the table. He was the last person in the room, which was a thing she had noticed about him, that he was always the first to arrive and always the last to leave, as if he was responsible for a room even after it had been used. He looked at her. Tell me everything that was said in dialect, he said. All of it, starting from the beginning. She had known this was coming. She had known it since the second day, when he said you changed something and she had given him a partial answer and he had not pushed but she had seen him file it. She set her bag down. She sat back down in her chair. She told him. All of it. Lorenzo's comments on the first day, the reference to the Ferraro family, the specific details of the northern warehouse, what Victor had said about the Ferraro daughter who had sold what she knew and disappeared. She told him the accurate version of every translation she had adjusted. She told him why she had adjusted each one. She did not tell him about herself, about the east side of Naples, about the 6 years between that life and this one. She told him only what was relevant to the room, to the deal, to the decisions she had made in the chair across from Lorenzo. When she finished, the room was very quiet. Ji-hoon had not moved while she spoke. He was still now in the specific way he was still when he was processing rather than waiting. She had learned to tell the difference. He looked at the table, then at her. She saved it, he said, in Korean. He had not meant to say it out loud. She could see that. It had escaped the gap between input and output for the first time in 3 days. Just one sentence, directed at no one, and landing on her. He registered that she had understood. She watched him register it. "You speak Korean," he said. "I understand it," she said. "There is a difference." "How long have you understood it?" "Since the first day." He was quiet again. She did not rush the quiet. "Why?" he said. "Did you say nothing?" She thought about the elevator on the first day, about the notepad, about the olive oil with its stained label, about "do not let her leave the building" and the arithmetic she had been running since she heard it. "Because understanding and showing that you understand," she said, "are two completely different jobs." He looked at her for a long time. Then he said, in English, each word placed with care, "Why did you protect the room?" "I needed the money," she said, "and then I didn't want the deal to fail. In that order." "In that order," he repeated. "In that order," she said. He was still looking at her. She was still looking at him. The room was empty and it was late afternoon. And outside the window the city was beginning its evening, lights starting in the towers, Seoul settling into itself. She stood up. She picked up her bag. She looked at him once more, direct and clear. "The olive oil," she said. He blinked. The first time she had seen him do that. "On the table," she said. "When I came in on the first day, the package I delivered. Someone ordered it. I assume it was supposed to go to a different meeting." He looked at the corner of the room where the package still sat, unopened, undisturbed through 3 days of everything. "My assistant," he said, after a moment, "ordered it for a dinner. Wrong address." "Wrong address," she said. She picked up the package. She held it out to him. He took it. Their hands did not touch. She had made certain of that. She walked to the door. She pressed the button for the elevator. The large man from the hallway was not there today. She was not sure when he had stopped being there. The elevator arrived. She stepped in. She pressed the lobby button. She thought about the envelope in her pocket. She thought about her mother's appointment in 8 days. She thought about the routes she had missed and the messages from the delivery company, and the night shift she would pick up this weekend, and the crack in the ceramic cup she had left on the table upstairs. She thought about what Ji-hoon had said. Saved it. Present tense, not past. The elevator opened to the lobby. Regular Seoul spread out through the glass doors. A motorcycle weaved between cars. Steam from a food cart. The smell of the city, ordinary and immediate. The city she lived in at street level where things did not happen at the 32nd floor. She walked through the doors. Her phone buzzed. Dispatch. A pickup in Mapo. 2 stops. Standard rate. She accepted the job. She put her earpiece in and started walking toward the motorcycle lane where the next courier bike was waiting. She did not look back at the building. 3 days later, a package arrived at her apartment. She had not given anyone in that building her home address. She stood in her doorway and looked at the box for a moment before picking it up. Inside, wrapped in paper, was the bottle of olive oil with the stained label, the same one she had delivered and then taken back and handed to him in the elevator. Underneath the bottle was a small card. On one side, a number. More than she had been paid for 3 days. Much more. On the other side, a single line in Italian that was clearly the product of a translation tool, slightly wrong in the way machines always are, the syntax slightly backward, the warmth coming through despite itself. "You are hired. Same rate. Reply if living." She stood in her doorway with the olive oil in one hand and the card in the other. She looked at it for a long time. She thought about her mother, whose account had somehow been paid forward. 18 months. She had checked that morning, when her mother called to say that the dialysis center had contacted her about an overpayment, and was not sure where the funds had come from. Nadia had said she would look into it. She had looked into it. She knew exactly where it had come from. She thought about Lorenzo's hand across the table, shaking hers first. About what he had said. About the particular look on Ji-hoon's face when he realized she had understood Korean for 3 days and said nothing. About the way still water waits. She went inside. She set the olive oil on the kitchen counter. She sat on the floor with her back against the cabinet, which was something she did when she was thinking, had done it since she was a child in the east side of Naples when thinking required a different posture. She looked at the card. She thought about how she had walked into that building as a delivery woman and walked out as something that did not have a clean name yet. She thought about how the things that change your life never feel like the things that are going to change your life when they are happening. They feel like wrong addresses. They feel like stained labels and wrong floors and standing in a hallway not knowing what is on the other side of the door. She thought about how she had sat in that chair for 3 days and done the job and left, and how the job had apparently not finished with her yet. She looked at the card one more time. She picked up her phone. She typed 2 words. Delivery confirmed. She sent it. She set the phone face down on the kitchen floor. She looked at the olive oil on the counter. She thought about how it had traveled, wrong address to wrong room to a meeting that should not have had her in it to his hands to her apartment door. Everything gets where it is going eventually. She got up. She opened the olive oil. She started cooking. Her phone buzzed once, on the floor, face down. She did not check it right away. She cooked. She ate. She washed the dishes. Then she picked up the phone. One message. From the unknown number. In Korean this time. No translation app. No backward syntax. 3 days. Same chair. She looked at it. She looked at the empty bottle of olive oil on the counter. She typed back. Same rate. 3 dots appeared. Then disappeared. Then one word arrived. When? She smiled. It was very small. It was over before it fully started. Tomorrow, she typed. She set the phone down. She turned off the kitchen light. She got ready for bed like a person who has made a decision that is perfectly ordinary and not at all the beginning of something she cannot yet name. She was just a delivery woman. The delivery, as it turned out, was still in progress.